tells you he wants to do is kill something. Say,
Yeah,
Bob, what do
about
you want to do
Sam, what
today? He says, I want to kill something. Okay, RJ, is your voice working?
I'm trying to be an American. Kill things.
You're outnumbered here.
Yeah. What's an American? Is this?
Yeah, but
Sorry about that.
start that way.
I
Alrighty.
can't kill you in Moolah.
Well, you don't really die in Lotro either, but that's for another venue. This venue is for the story of the fall.
Ah, yes.
Yeah.
A very important story of the fall. And as I
Favorite story.
that's right, my favorite story of all 104 stories. So, without further ado, let's get this shoe in the rood. Alright, so as we progress through the stories of the kings, we've seen many changes in the Dini culture. We saw an austere lifestyle that began with King Rinaref, supplanted by greed and avarice that began with King Shomat. We saw a devotion to Yahweh and a single faith, supplanted by diverse religions and religious beliefs numbering over 2,000, diminishing to just a handful by the end of Kareth's reign. Pausing here, is my voice still cutting out, or is it better now?
Better now.
Okay.
Good for me.
Perfect.
Alrighty. Because of the writings of a martyred, self-proclaimed prophet named Gish, we saw their belief system being hijacked and steered away from the words and teachings of Yahweh. And with King Jeron, Kareth's grandfather, the classes had become the most divided ever in their history. Yet the more violent factions of Dini decided to follow Yahweh more closely and hope for a peaceful solution to their different point of view regarding contact with Arotanti. Gish's writings resulted in a conservative culture within Dini society, a culture that held the Arotanti, or outsiders, with great disdain and contempt. This general attitude among the Dini was another contributing factor in the demise of a once great empire. We also looked at the Mede-Dis War, which occurred during the early 8th millennium of Dini history. It was a war that was once again started by violent factions who were vehemently against contact with the Arotanti. This prejudice, though not held with the same violent emotions, was still felt by the majority of Dini society, a society that was very ethnocentric as well as xenophobic. These feelings and opinions remained prevalent up to the fall. We learned about Agarus, the architect of the fall. His motives were not ethnocentric, nor did they stem from xenophobia. He was driven strictly by revenge. Revenge for being wrongly accused and convicted of a crime he did not commit. Revenge that drove him to commit genocide against his own people, a character flaw that would spell the end of an empire. Also, there were the beginnings of Atris, one of the heroes of the fall, the excavation of the great shaft, and of a friendship with Viovis, who would become one of the villains of the fall. We learned about a surface dweller named Anna, her life on the surface and how she came to find the cavern, and those same old Dini fears of the Arotanti, the outsiders. We learned of Anna's time in prison, her learning the Dini language, and of Viovis's anger which started to burn against her, over his beliefs in Dini elitism and supremacy over all other races. We learned of Anna's trial and of her uncertain future, and how she came to live with Atris' parents while the five lords were debating her future. We saw how Viovis, through his arrogance, assumed Anna would not come to his first book celebration, and how Atris took exception to his friend's snubbing of Anna, and in turn snubbed his friend for making him choose between the two. And, finally, deciding to write an age with Anna, and how after living and working together they fell in love, and how that love alienated Viovis, causing his anger to burn brighter than ever and bring an end to his friendship with Atris. We learned about the origins of the Watcher's Sanctuary, how Guildmaster Kadish purchased the sanctuary and Urkana and built Anone in order to perpetuate the lie that he was the grower, as he fancied himself to be. We learned about the birth of Gen, and how Agaris was a master forger who also went by the moniker the Philosopher amongst those in the lower city. We learned how Agaris' forgeries led to the distrust between Atris and Viovis, and the latter's becoming accused and convicted of a crime he did not commit, stripping him of all he knew. This brought great shame not only on him, but on his family as well. In fact, the shame was so great, it ultimately affected his father's health, hastening an early death. In addition to this, his friend Suaner cannot be found. As Viovis' trial ended, so too did his father's life come to a close. Though Atris blamed himself for setting the great wheels of the Denis state in motion, wheels that could crush a man as easily as their great hammers pound the rock, it was actually Agaris who sent this masterful though evil plan into motion. We learned about Gen's early years and how his relationship with his mother went from being very close, basically he was a mama's boy, to becoming distant, and his becoming enamored of the knowledge possessed by the guilds, in turn causing him to start identifying more with his Denis heritage than his Arotanti heritage. In short, the beginnings of his pride. We watched as Agaris' plans for revenge began to unfold. He and Viovis had committed various acts of terror in Denis, using linking books that had been stolen from various guilds. Anna followed Viovis to his and Agaris' readout and saw their plans, knowing that she had to stop them there and then. She was setting a trap when she watched in horror as her beloved Atris was thrown into a cage suspended over the murky green sea of their secret age. Last time, we learned of Agaris and Viovis' plans to start a revolt among the lower classes of Denis, and Viovis telling Agaris that what was needed was a poisoned dart. If it weren't for Anna's plan to stop it, they might have succeeded. Unfortunately, or I should say fortunately, she was able to destroy their cache of linking books and blank books, while making off with Agaris' journal. She was able to set fire to the books, but not before being shot by Viovis, but managed to trap him in the ensuing inferno. She was able to link back to Denis, right into the middle of a meeting of the Five Lords. Viovis followed her, even though he was on fire from her trap, and was immediately caught. Now, we will learn about the sentencing of a traitor and the fall of Denis. Tonight's story opens approximately midway through the year of 93-99, approximately near the end of 1743 AD, about 2 weeks later at Viovis' trial. All of the evidence had been heard. The verdict was unanimous guilty. All that remained was for the sentence to be handed down by the Five Lords. The guild chamber was full, and with several guests present, including Anna with her arm in a sling and her shoulder bandaged. Atris was there as well, with bandages on his head. Viovus sat quietly, his head shaved and wearing a rust-red prison gown. Lord Rahira addressed the assembly. The five had decided that the only fitting punishment for Viovus was death. He would be taken from the chamber, and at the 17th hour he would be beheaded. There was a collective gasp from the chamber. There had not been an execution in Denis for many years, and had been unheard of in recent times, since well before the five ancient lords were born. As was the tradition, Rahira asked the audience if anyone would care to speak for the accused. Anna stood. Granting that if anyone had the right to speak it was Tiana, Rahira bid her to come forward and address the five. Viovus flew into a rage. "That barbaric animal is going to speak on my behalf? Never! I won't allow it!" Though Rahira commanded him to be silent, Viovus continued with his tirade until Rahira ordered that he be removed from the chamber. With order finally restored, Anna began her plea for Viovus's life. Though this may seem rather odd behavior for her, seeing how his desire was to kill her and her husband, she had come into some new information. One of the items she brought back from the readout was Agarus's own journal. In it was detailed all of his twisted plans, including his selection of Viovus as his accomplice. He had chosen well. Viovus' character flaws regarding his ethnocentric beliefs and his poor control over his anger made him the perfect patsy to become the perfect ally. She shared the journal with the five lords. Though she wasn't excusing his behavior, she offered it as an explanation. He was, after all, originally innocent, yet was stripped of all he knew. She entreated them to imagine the bitterness that he must have felt. Because of his original innocence, she felt that a prison age would be a more appropriate sentence than death. After taking several days to pore over the journal, the five agreed with her. To maintain secrecy and security of the age, and to eliminate any possibility for someone to gain access to a linking book to rescue Viovus, as had been done before, extraordinary steps were taken. First, it would be a brand new age. 4 different writers were commissioned to write 4 different parts of the age, each working to Lord Rahira's instructions. They wrote in ordinary books, not linking or descriptive books. Their work was passed on to Grand Master Jair of the Guild of Writers, who with Grand Master Jadaris of the Guild of Maintainers reviewed the texts. They, in turn, made minor corrections to ensure the age would be stable. Meanwhile, Agarus was making plans of his own. With Suner's help and guidance for its dimensions, a prison cell with a podium was constructed. Agarus had had his head shaved and donned a rust-red gown. As he looked over the construction and reviewed his plans, he thought to himself, "No rules, no guidelines, nothing but what I want. Nothing but what I want." With the blank book guarded continuously around the clock, one by one the 4 writers returned to add their work to the book. Neither had any knowledge of what any of the others had written. No one knew except the 3 most trusted men in Denis, Jadaris, Jair, and Rhaenyra. So too was Veovis guarded. Shackled to the guards, he was watched around the clock. It took over 100 days to complete the new prison age, but at last it was finished. This time, there would be no team of maintainers to link there to ensure the age's stability. There would be no surveying. Veovis would be the first, last, and only person to link to that world. So, at the 17th hour, on the Day of Judgment, as the great bronze bell on top of the Guild of Maintainers Guild Hall rang out, Veovis, son of Rhaenyra, and disgraced son of Denis, placed his unbound hand on the linking panel and vanished, to live out the rest of his days on his new world. Immediately afterward, Lord Rhaenyra ordered Master Jaehaerys to burn the book. As he was speaking, Rhaenyra noticed a shimmering in the air before the book. There appeared, for an instant, a man with a shaved head wearing a prison gown. Unsure of what he had just seen, he convinced himself that it was an after-image, perhaps a flaw in the book. After all, this was the first time in their entire history an age had been constructed this way. Master Jaehaerys closed the book, and with everyone present following in behind him, he took the book to the furnace room. Rhaenyra watched as the flames began to consume this book. Before now, the furnace had only been used to burn books that were known to be defective. This was the first time that a perfectly good book was destroyed on purpose. It was not the Denis way to destroy what was healthy, but this was necessary. This was different. No one would be able to enter that age again. It did not matter if a linking book had somehow been managed to be written. The destruction of the descriptive book would render any and all linking books to that age useless. It was done. For all their preparations, for all their precautions, the 5 lords still succumbed to one fatal flaw: their pride. Their pride in Denis and the way that everything was done, the way things had always been done, prevented them from straying too far afield from their traditions. Even with the knowledge that Agarus was still at large, and of his ability to link into various places of Denis, they kept on with their traditions, as had been done for thousands of generations. The announcement was made on the day and time of Veovis' sentencing. The same prison cell that had always been used for sending a criminal to a prison age was used again. Suanir knew this. Agarus knew this. Allowing time for Veovis to link to his new home, Agarus linked into the prison cell, and then to the new age. Dressed as Veovis, he would be dismissed as an after-image, and so he was. The months passed quickly, and things returned to normal in the cavern. Goods were purchased, goods were sold, people went to work. That is, until early in the 3rd month of the new year. As people were going merrily about their lives,
You're cutting out again, Ate.
the months passed quickly. As things returned to normal in the cavern, goods were purchased, goods were sold, people went to work.
Hey, cutting out badly.
All right, let me try this again. Am I okay now? Testing, testing, 1, 2, 3, testing.
Yeah.
All right. The months passed quickly, and things returned to normal in the cavern. Goods were purchased, goods were sold, people went to work. That is, until early in the 3rd month of the new year. As people were going merrily about their lives, an explosion rocked the cavern. Not like when the ink works was bombed. This was different. It started with a tremor that shook buildings. Then a deep rumbling came that felt as if it were coming from under the earth. On the cavern wall, opposite the guild halls, a large crack opened up. From it spewed a large, dark cloud. It slowly spread along the cavern walls and down to the lake. Screams could be heard as panic gripped the streets. The cloud killed everything in its path. As it overtook the citizenry, they would collapse in agony, cutting off their cries of fear and pain. Those that could linked to their private ages. Those that could not died. Even the light-giving algae in the lake were not immune. Where the cloud touched the surface of the lake, the algae died. By the time the cloud reached the far wall, almost all of the light in the cavern was gone. Viova struck his poisoned dart. And so it was that on the 8th day of the 3rd month in the Denis year of 9400, July 12th, 1744 A.D. on the surface, and after standing for almost 10,000 years, Denis fell. Not from foreign invaders, not from natural disaster. Rather, it was from pride and from within. Please join us next time as we learn the fates of Anna and Atris, of Viovis and Agarus, of Gen and the rest of Denis. The end.
Thank you very much.
You're very welcome. And thanks, Lords. Thanks, Susan. You're welcome, Kiwi. And thank you all for coming tonight.
I could hear the emotion in your voice, RJ.
I have lost track how many times I have told this story, Susan. It gets me in my chest every single time. You're welcome, Selman. I'm glad you enjoyed it.
Okay, will story night be on next week?
Yes, it will. The original Story Night will be on next week. Story Night Europe will not.
Okay.
And I'm glad you enjoyed the story, Solomon. And it's time to close out the story right now.